This is bad visual art. This is bad music. And this is bad cinema.
I've been hacking into government and corporate systems all over the country.
Now, all this bad, not good stuff is actually pretty useful, and I believe that you should be spending more time engaging with it. Not because it's fun, because it's not enjoyable at all. Not because it's secretly good, because it's by definition bad. And not because I think you should be a cringe consumer, because as much as, I see myself as a bit of a cringe connoisseur, it's not good for anyone. No, the thesis goes that you should engage with the bad art in the world so that you can better understand and appreciate the really good stuff. And that's something I think I can back up. With the exception of the Metallica and Lou Reed album, which is really The Unforgiven. So this idea I initially picked up from Ted Gioia, the jazz writer, specifically his book, How to Listen to Jazz, and I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. If I'm not, can you please let me know in the comments? Actually, even if I am pronouncing it right, let me know. But he writes in this book, lack of rhythmic cohesion can easily be heard in second-rate jazz bands, and even listeners who don't know much about music will sense it subliminally. You may think that you know nothing about jazz, but if you take the time to compare amateur and professional bands, you will find that you can soon tell the difference from their varying levels of comfort and confidence in their rhythmic interaction. He then goes on to suggest that you should check out YouTube for student jazz bands as one sort of easy, bankable way to find some sort of not as good jazz as the professionals, and that's a great approach. Now, this doesn't just apply to jazz, I think it applies to all creative work. In fact, in researching this video, I found that there was a museum of bad art in Boston, Massachusetts, which I think is just wonderful, and I do plan to visit one day. But I think jazz is a really great way to demonstrate it because it's infamously inaccessible. It's harmonically complex, rhythmically difficult, not singable, doesn't repeat a lot, at least compared to pop music, and it's just generally very hard to engage with for beginners. Now that surely is a feature, and it makes the genre unique, but it's also a really bad bug, and it drives people away. We can talk about that another time. But with any type of creative endeavor, with any type of art, you do need to familiarize yourself a little bit to give yourself the opportunity to create a sense of taste. Okay, so I'm sitting in front of a bookshelf now because we're doing a bit of a narrative storytelling, or I just want to look smart, I guess. Up next is a dictionary definition, but I don't have a dictionary, so I'm going to use this as a prop. It is a Jasper Fforde book. It's a very good one as well. The relevant definitions for the word taste that we care about are: 1, a person's liking for a particular flavor. 2, a person's tendency to like or be interested in something. Now they're relevant, but what's really important is this third one: the ability to discern what is of good quality or of a high aesthetic standard. Now, to avoid being accused of gatekeeping, I would say that remember those aesthetic standards differ between different people and they're all equally valid. But back to the definitions, which, by the way, are great for high school debates or for douchebags who want to correct people on semantic points. But why am I focusing here on the definition of the word taste? Well, besides being a little bit of a douchebag myself, it's also because it relates to a quote from the podcaster Ira Glass. So I used to work in radio, and this is back when This American Life, which Ira Glass was the creator and presenter of, was kind of one of the only podcasts that were really worth listening to. Mind you, no one who listened to the podcast was necessarily worth hanging out with, but it's a whole other thing. Anyway, there's this one Ira Glass quote about creativity that really stuck with me. Now, I was really excited in this video to sort of do an Ira Glass impression. I was thinking about how I'd work on it, and then I realized the man has a microphone surgically implanted into his chest. So of course the quote that I was looking for had audio. So here's that.
All of us who do creative work, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean?
I was talking about young creators here, those who have drunk deeply at the well of what has come before in their chosen field, and they have a really developed sense of what they love in their medium. Trouble is, that's a really hard place to be, especially when you're starting out and what you're creating is not anywhere near, from a quality perspective, what you're trying to achieve, what you know's out there, and what you know you're potentially capable of. Now that's super disheartening. And as a lifelong, I would say, dilettante of the creative arts, I get that. And it's a kind of awful place to be. But part of my reasoning for bad art being a useful thing for everyone to engage in to some extent is actually sort of this process. Ira's saying that by understanding what good art is, you know, and you can flag when what you're creating is subpar, but I think it works in the opposite as well. When you create subpar art, you are engaging with bad creative works, and that helps you hone and understand and appreciate what makes the greats really, really great. Now that's all well and good for artists, or even for creative LARPers who never actually release the fruits of their creative work. But for someone who is primarily a consumer of creative work, it's still really important to have taste. For a very literal example, I do not manufacture chips or corn snacks, and yet I can tell you that cheese twisties are far superior to chicken twisties because I can taste the difference. And yet, my partner Liz would do exactly the same taste test and tell you the exact opposite thing, because standards can be different between people, and that is okay. But how did we both develop our personal standards, those idiosyncratic list of things that tickles our fancy? Put simply, exposure. Okay, so we are back at the bookshelf because this is the section of the video where we talk about research, but I don't have a printer to pretend like I'm reading the research, so instead this is the most scholarly looking of any of the books on the bookshelf. It's the Ray Bradbury compendium that my partner owns, not me. So if you would just suspend your disbelief for a moment or two, that would be appreciated. There are many papers that link the appreciation of music to a familiarity and exposure to that particular music, whether it's a piece or a genre. And here are a couple of those papers, at least from the last decade or two. I'm sure there are many more, and I'm sure there are equivalent papers for different types of art. But I'll just speak to the half a dozen or so music-related ones that I checked out. And there was a range of different ways that they figured out what liking a piece of music meant, from MRIs to self-reported survey questions. But in every case, there were a few fairly consistent findings. One, greater familiarity with a piece or a genre of music made people like it more. Two, there was an inverted U-shape to this effect over time. So you began not liking the music that much, and then as you had a little bit more exposure, you like it quite a lot. And then you get the overplay. You know, think Bohemian Rhapsody, Wonderwall, Uptown Funk, when you suddenly don't really enjoy the song anymore. Number three, complexity didn't really matter. It wasn't a factor. This effect, this inverted U, would have worked just as well on super complex jazz as it would have on, say, pop music. And number four, previous exposure to a particular genre made it more likely that a particular piece from that genre would be liked earlier. So the start of that U-shape would be a little bit steeper. Now this is all really obvious stuff, or at least very intuitive, I think. And I think it's also very intuitive that it applies to all types of art, not just music. If you don't like jazz, go listen to some Hank Mobley. If you're not much for abstract art, go and study and learn about Matisse. Maybe you're not a big fan of anime. Go watch the first season of Cowboy Bebop and you might change your mind. Now there's no guarantee it'll work. Maybe what you disliked before you'll dislike still, but at least you'll be coming from a more educated perspective. And this is where I feel like we land when it comes to consuming bad art, be it film, music, whatever. Exposure and familiarity with the full gamut of what's out there from various different genres, as well as the sort of peak and troughs of that genre, help craft and define what we like and gives us the confidence to know why we like it. And whether this approach gives you something new that you really enjoy or appreciate, or it just kind of backs up your own old taste, at least you can defend it. And I think that's a really valuable thing. Thank you for watching. Before you go, jump into the comments and tell me something that you didn't like once back in the day, but because you exposed yourself to it, you came to like it. It could be interesting reading. And while you're down there, go disagree with someone and start a fight in the comments. I could do with the engagement. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Bye.